When 22-year-old Leev walked off the Hohenfels Training Area for what she thought was the last time, clutching her grandfather's World War II rifle, she believed her dream of becoming a military sniper was over. She had no idea that her quiet departure would trigger the most unprecedented demonstration of solidarity in European military training history, forever changing how the Corps viewed tradition, excellence, and the true meaning of marksmanship. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Hohenfels Training Area in Bavaria as Leev adjusted the worn leather strap of her grandfather's 1943 Mauser K98k. The rifle had seen action in the mountains of Norway, had saved her grandfather's life more times than he could count, and had been lovingly maintained for over 8 decades. Its wooden stock bore the scars of countless battles. Its metal showed the patina of age, but its precision remained as deadly as the day it left the factory. Other trainees at the European Union Military Training Center carried the latest equipment, state-of-the-art. Rifles with digital scopes, laser rangefinders, and computerized ballistics calculators. Their gear gleamed with modern technology, each piece worth more than most people's cars. But Leev's rifle told a different story. It spoke of tradition, of proven reliability, of a time when marksmanship was about the shooter, not the equipment. She had arrived at Hohenfels 3 months earlier as part of the EU's elite international sniper training program, one of only 12 candidates selected from across 27 member nations. The program was designed to create the next generation of military marksmen, combining the best techniques from various European military traditions. Competition was fierce, standards were impossibly high, and failure meant immediate dismissal. Leev had earned her place through exceptional performance in her home country's military. Her qualification scores had been perfect, her psychological evaluations outstanding, her physical fitness exemplary. But she possessed something that made certain instructors uncomfortable: the quiet confidence of someone who trusted their grandfather's teachings more than modern military doctrine. The other candidates had noticed her rifle immediately. During the first day's equipment inspection, their whispers had been barely concealed. Is that thing even functional? Does it have iron sights? How is she supposed to compete with museum piece? The comments stung, but Leev had learned long ago that actions spoke louder than words. Her grandfather, Erik, had been one of Norway's most decorated snipers during World War II. He had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, starting with .22 caliber rifles before gradually working up to the K98k. Leev, he would say in his weathered voice, technology changes, but the fundamentals never do. Breathing, trigger control, patience, these things don't require computers. The rifle itself was a masterpiece of German engineering. The Mauser action was smooth as silk. The barrel had been refined to maintain perfect accuracy, and Erik had customized the trigger to break at exactly 2 pounds. The scope was a modern addition, a high-quality German optic that Erik had installed in the 1970s, but everything else remained exactly as it had been during the war. While other candidates spent their evenings cleaning complex electronic systems and updating software, Leev would carefully oil her rifle's wooden stock and polish its metal components. The ritual was meditative, connecting her to decades of military tradition and her grandfather's memory. He had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving her the rifle along with his shooting journals filled with observations about wind reading, range estimation, and the psychology of precision shooting. The training center's daily routine was demanding. Physical fitness at dawn, followed by classroom instruction in ballistics, meteorology, and combat tactics. Afternoons were spent on the range, where candidates practiced increasingly difficult shots under various conditions. The program was designed to push trainees to their limits, to separate those with natural talent from those with mere ambition. From the beginning, Leev's performance had been exceptional. Her first-round hits were consistently accurate, her range estimations precise, her movement techniques fluid. But the vintage rifle drew constant attention and subtle mockery from both fellow candidates and some instructors. The contrast was stark. While others relied on digital displays and computerized calculations, Leev used mental mathematics and instinctive feel developed through years of practice. "You know," fellow candidate Marcus from Germany had commented, "during their second week, you might actually have a chance if you used proper equipment. That antique is holding you back." His rifle sported a scope that cost more than most cars, with built-in ballistics computers and environmental sensors. But Leev had learned something that the others hadn't yet discovered. When technology fails, when batteries die, when sophisticated systems break down under combat stress, only fundamental skills matter. Her grandfather's rifle had never failed her, just as it had never failed him during the harshest conditions imaginable. As the sun climbed higher over the Bavarian countryside, Leev prepared for another day of training, unaware that she was about to face challenges that would test not just her marksmanship, but her character, her resolve, and her unwavering belief in the wisdom of those who came before her. The first demonstration of Leev's exceptional ability came during week 4 of training, on a crisp October morning when the alpine air was so clear that the distant mountains seemed close enough to touch. Master Sergeant Francois Dubois, the program's chief instructor and a veteran of 3 tours in Afghanistan, had set up one of the most challenging exercises the candidates had yet faced. "Today we test your fundamental skills," Dubois announced in his accented English, addressing the 12 remaining candidates. 2 had already been eliminated for failing to meet the program's exacting standards. No ballistic computers, no electronic aids. This is about the shooter, not the equipment. The targets were steel plates positioned at various ranges from 300 to 800 meters, placed at irregular intervals across the rolling hills of the training area. Each candidate would have exactly 10 rounds to engage 10 different targets, with no opportunity for ranging shots or scope adjustments between positions. The morning breeze was shifting, creating constantly changing wind conditions that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Marcus from Germany went first, his high-tech rifle gleaming in the sunlight. Despite its sophisticated computer systems, he managed only 6 hits out of 10 attempts. The French candidate Claire achieved 7 hits with her precision-built rifle worth nearly 20,000 euros. One by one, the candidates attempted the course, their scores ranging from 5 to 8 successful engagements. When Leev's turn came, she approached the firing line with her grandfather's rifle slung casually across her shoulder. The other candidates exchanged glances, some smiling in anticipation of watching the museum piece fail under pressure. Even a few instructors seemed skeptical. Though they maintained professional composure, Leev settled into her first shooting position with fluid economy of movement. She had learned her technique not from military manuals, but from her grandfather's patient instruction during countless hours in the Norwegian mountains. Her breathing was controlled and natural, her grip firm but relaxed, her body position perfectly aligned with the rifle's natural point of aim. The first target was a 12-inch steel plate at 350 meters. Leev studied the wind indicators, grass movement, heat shimmer, the subtle drift of dust in the air, exactly as her grandfather had taught her. She made minute adjustments to her point of aim, compensating for the crosswind with calculations performed entirely in her head. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the hills, and the distinctive ring of steel confirmed a perfect hit. Target after target fell to her precise shooting. The 400-meter plate struck dead center. The 600-meter target hit despite a tricky wind condition that had fooled 3 previous shooters. The 750-meter steel, a shot that required compensating for both wind and elevation, struck with authority. Her movements between positions were smooth and efficient, each shot taken with the same calm deliberation. By the 7th target, The training area had fallen unusually quiet. Other candidates stopped their equipment maintenance to watch. Instructors found reasons to observe from better vantage points. Even Master Sergeant Dubois, who had seen hundreds of snipers in his career, stood with arms crossed and an expression of growing respect. The eighth target was positioned at 800 meters on a slight upslope, partially obscured by a heat mirage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That made accurate range estimation extremely difficult. Previous shooters had either missed completely or barely clipped the edge of the steel. Leev studied the target through her grandfather's scope, mentally calculating the complex ballistics required for such a shot with the vintage ammunition. Her rifle used dot, she adjusted her position slightly, finding a more stable shooting platform among the rocks. Her breathing slowed to the rhythm her grandfather had taught her, 2 breaths to settle, then fire during the natural respiratory pause. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar authority, and a moment later the distant ring confirmed. Another perfect hit. The final 2 targets fell with the same methodical precision. 10 shots, 10 hits, each one placed exactly where she had intended. The performance was flawless, accomplished with equipment that some considered obsolete by modern standards. As Leev stood and safed her rifle, the silence on the training range was profound. She had not only outscored every other candidate by a significant margin, but had done so with apparent ease, as if the challenging course had been merely a routine exercise. The vintage rifle that others had mocked had proven its worth in the most decisive way possible. Master Sergeant Dubois approached her with the kind of expression reserved for truly exceptional performances. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked quietly. "My grandfather," Leev replied simply, checking her rifle's safety one final time. "He said equipment is only as good as the person using it." The other candidates gathered around, their earlier mockery replaced by genuine respect and curiosity. Marcus examined the K98k with new appreciation, noting the smooth action and precise trigger. "This rifle is incredible," he admitted. "I've never seen shooting like that." But not everyone was impressed by the demonstration. From the observation platform, Colonel Heinrich Richter watched with narrowed eyes and a growing sense of unease. The Austrian officer had been assigned to oversee the program, and he believed firmly that modern warfare required modern equipment. In his view, Leev's performance with vintage equipment sent the wrong message to military professionals who needed to embrace technological advancement. What Colonel Richter saw was not exceptional marksmanship, but dangerous nostalgia that could undermine the program's mission to create modern military snipers. He began planning how to address what he considered a problem that needed correction. The European Union Military Training Center at Hohenfels represented the pinnacle of modern military education, a facility where the continent's finest soldiers came to master the art of precision warfare. Nestled in the Bavarian countryside, the 16,000-hectare training area featured some of the most sophisticated simulation equipment in the world, designed to prepare snipers for the complex challenges of contemporary conflict. The program itself was a testament to European military cooperation, bringing together the best marksmen from 27 member nations to share techniques, technologies, and tactical approaches. Each candidate represented years of training within their national military systems, and competition for the 12 available spots had been fierce. Only the most exceptional soldiers were invited to participate in what many considered the continent's most prestigious sniper school. Colonel Heinrich Richter had been personally selected to oversee the program due to his reputation for modernizing military training protocols. The Austrian officer had spent the previous 5 years implementing technology-driven curricula across various European military institutions, earning recognition for his advocacy of cutting-edge equipment and data-driven instruction methods. His philosophy was simple: modern warfare demanded modern solutions, and soldiers who clung to outdated methods endangered themselves and their comrades. The training center's facilities reflected this technological emphasis. The main range featured computerized target systems that could simulate various combat scenarios, from urban environments to mountainous terrain. Environmental monitoring stations provided real-time data on wind speed, humidity, temperature, and atmospheric pressure, allowing instructors to teach students how to use technology to compensate for challenging conditions. Each candidate had been issued standardized equipment worth nearly €50,000, precision rifles with advanced optics, ballistic computers, laser rangefinders, and environmental sensors. The gear represented the latest in military technology, designed to give soldiers every possible advantage in combat situations. The program's curriculum emphasized mastery of these systems, teaching candidates to rely on technological solutions rather than intuitive skills. Master Sergeant Dubois, despite his appreciation for Leev's performance, operated within this technological framework. His job was to produce snipers capable of operating effectively with contemporary military equipment, not to encourage reliance on vintage gear that might not be available in actual combat situations. The program's success was measured by how well graduates could integrate advanced technology into their tactical operations. The stakes were enormous for each candidate. Graduation from Hohenfels opened doors to elite military units across Europe, special operations assignments, and advanced training opportunities that could define entire careers. Failure meant returning to regular military service, a professional setback that could take years to overcome. The program's 40% attrition rate ensured that only the most capable and adaptable soldiers earned the coveted sniper qualification. For Leev, the stakes were particularly high. As one of only 3 female candidates in the program's history, she faced additional scrutiny and pressure to prove that women could excel in roles traditionally dominated by men. Her Norwegian military had invested significant resources in her training, and her success or failure would influence future decisions about female participation in special operations roles. The international nature of the program added another layer of complexity. Each candidate represented not just their personal ambitions, but their nation's military reputation. Cultural differences in training methods, equipment preferences, and tactical philosophies created subtle tensions that instructors had to navigate carefully. Some countries favored technology-heavy approaches, while others emphasized traditional fieldcraft skills. The German candidates, Marcus and Klaus, exemplified the program's technological focus. Both carried rifles equipped with computerized scopes that could calculate ballistic solutions automatically, accounting for range, wind, temperature, and ammunition characteristics. Their training had emphasized data analysis and technological proficiency, teaching them to trust instruments over intuition. The French contingent, led by Claire, brought a different perspective that balanced technology with traditional marksmanship principles. Their equipment was equally advanced, but their training had included extensive work on fundamental shooting skills that could function independently of technological aids. This approach reflected France's military philosophy of maintaining core competencies while embracing modern innovations. Other candidates represented various points along the spectrum between pure technology and traditional skills. The Italian sniper, Antonio, had been trained primarily on urban warfare scenarios using advanced surveillance equipment. The Swedish candidate, Magnus, specialized in Arctic warfare techniques that required adaptation to extreme environmental conditions. Each brought unique strengths that enriched the program's educational environment. Colonel Richter viewed this diversity as both an opportunity and a challenge. His goal was to create a standardized European approach to sniper training that could be implemented across all member nations. This vision required candidates to adapt to common equipment and procedures, regardless of their national training backgrounds. Individual preferences and traditional methods were obstacles to this standardization effort. The colonel had noticed Leev's performance with growing concern. While her accuracy was undeniable, her reliance on vintage equipment contradicted everything he believed about modern military training. In his view, exceptional performance with obsolete gear was actually counterproductive, as it might encourage other soldiers to reject the technological solutions that represented the future of military operations. The program's remaining weeks would test not only the candidates' marksmanship skills, but their ability to adapt to increasingly complex scenarios that required integration of multiple technological systems. These challenges would determine who possessed the complete skill set necessary for contemporary sniper operations, and who would be eliminated for failing to meet modern military standards. Colonel Heinrich Richter stood in his office overlooking the Hohenfels training ranges, studying personnel files with the methodical attention that had characterized his entire military career. At 52, he was regarded as one of Austria's most progressive military educators, a man who had dedicated his life to modernizing European armed forces for 21st century conflicts. His office walls displayed certificates from NATO training institutions, photographs with defense ministers from across Europe, and awards recognizing his contributions to military technological advancement. The colonel's philosophy was born from hard experience. During his deployment to Afghanistan, he had witnessed firsthand the consequences of soldiers who relied on outdated methods and equipment. He had seen good men die because they trusted intuition over data, because they clung to traditional techniques instead of embracing technological solutions that could save lives. These experiences had shaped his unwavering belief that modern warfare demanded modern approaches. His assignment to oversee the EU sniper program represented the culmination of his career's work. The initiative was designed to create standardized training protocols that could be implemented across all member nations, ensuring that European snipers operated with common equipment, procedures, and technological proficiency. Success would position Richter for promotion to general rank and assignment to NATO Strategic Planning Division. The program's emphasis on advanced technology reflected Richter's personal convictions. He had personally selected the standardized equipment package, choosing systems that represented the cutting edge of military innovation. Every piece of gear had been tested extensively, proven in combat, and designed to give soldiers maximum advantage in challenging situations. The ballistic computers could perform calculations in milliseconds that would take human minds minutes to complete. The environmental sensors could detect atmospheric conditions with precision, impossible through human observation. Richter viewed the candidate's performance through this technological lens. Marcus and Klaus impressed him with their systematic approach to equipment integration, their careful attention to data analysis, and their willingness to trust computerized solutions over personal judgment. Claire demonstrated excellent adaptation to new systems while maintaining the fundamental skills that made her an effective marksman. These candidates represented the future of European military excellence, but Leev's performance with her grandfather's rifle created a fundamental problem that challenged everything Richter believed about proper military training. Her exceptional accuracy with vintage equipment might seem impressive to casual observers, but the colonel understood the dangerous precedent it could establish. If other soldiers concluded that modern technology was unnecessary, they might reject the very innovations designed to keep them alive in combat. The issue went beyond simple equipment preferences. Richter had spent years fighting against military traditionalists who resisted change, who clung to outdated methods because that's how we've always done it. These attitudes represented real threats to military effectiveness and soldier safety. Progress required discipline, standardization, and unwavering commitment to proven technological solutions. During his evening review of training reports, Richter discovered additional concerns about Leev's influence on other candidates. Several had begun asking questions about traditional marksmanship techniques, expressing interest in fundamental skills that required no technological support. Marcus had been observed practicing range estimation using only visual cues, abandoning the laser rangefinder that was supposed to be his primary tool. Claire had started calculating wind effects manually instead of relying on her ballistic computer. This regression worried Richter deeply. The program's goal was to advance military capabilities, not to encourage soldiers to reject the tools that modern warfare demanded. If candidates graduated believing that vintage equipment and traditional methods were superior to contemporary systems, they would carry these dangerous misconceptions to their home units, potentially compromising military effectiveness across Europe. The colonel's concerns were reinforced by his conversations with other senior officers who shared his technological philosophy. General Patricia Müller from Germany had warned him about the risks of allowing romantic nostalgia to influence military training. Soldiers need to trust their equipment completely, she had emphasized during a recent conference call. Any doubt about technological solutions can prove fatal in combat situations. Richter also worried about the political implications of Leev's performance. The EU sniper program represented a significant investment in military cooperation, with substantial funding from multiple member nations. If the initiative appeared to validate outdated approaches rather than advancing military capabilities, it could face budget cuts or cancellation. His own reputation as a modernizing force within European military circles depended on the program's success in promoting technological advancement. The colonel began developing a strategy to address what he viewed as a growing problem. Leev's performance needed to be evaluated within proper context, demonstrating that exceptional individual ability with vintage equipment was not relevant to contemporary military requirements. The program's final exercises would need to emphasize scenarios where modern technology provided clear advantages, where traditional methods would prove inadequate or dangerous. He scheduled a meeting with Master Sergeant Dubois to discuss modifications to the training curriculum. The remaining weeks would include night operations requiring advanced optics, long-range scenarios demanding precise ballistic calculations, and multiple target engagements where rapid technological solutions were essential. These challenges would demonstrate the limitations of traditional approaches while highlighting the superiority of modern systems. Richter also planned to document Leev's performance carefully, creating detailed reports that would explain why her accuracy with vintage equipment was not indicative of proper military training outcomes. These documents would be crucial for defending the program's technological emphasis to senior leadership and securing continued support for modernization initiatives. The colonel understood that his approach might seem harsh to those who admired Leev's obvious skill, but military leadership required making difficult decisions that prioritized long-term effectiveness over short-term popularity. His responsibility was to produce snipers capable of succeeding in contemporary conflicts, not to validate romantic attachments to historical equipment. As evening settled over the Bavarian countryside, Richter reviewed his plans one final time. The program's success depended on maintaining focus on technological advancement and modern military requirements. Individual preferences and traditional methods, no matter how skillfully demonstrated, could not be allowed to undermine these essential objectives. The first indication of Colonel Richter's campaign came during the following week's equipment standardization briefing. The 10 remaining candidates, 2 more had been eliminated after failing the night navigation exercise assembled in the Pesmaz sterile conference room where the program's administrative decisions were announced. Richter stood at the front of the room, his uniform immaculate, his expression conveying the serious nature of what he was about to announce. Effective immediately, all candidates will utilize standardized equipment packages for all training exercises, the colonel declared, his Austrian accent adding formality to words that carried the weight of policy change. Individual equipment preferences, regardless of performance history, are no longer acceptable. This program is designed to prepare you for contemporary military operations, not to validate personal attachments to obsolete gear. Leev felt the words land like physical blows. While Richter never mentioned her by name, every person in the room understood the directive's target. The vintage Mauser that had served her so well, that connected her to her grandfather's legacy, that had outperformed every piece of modern equipment on the range, was being banned from further use. "Sir," Leev raised her hand respectfully, maintaining the military courtesy that had been ingrained in her since basic training. "May I ask about the rationale for this change? Current performance metrics suggest that equipment diversity has not compromised training effectiveness." Richter's eyes focused on her with the intensity of a laser sight. "Did I request input, candidate? Policy decisions are made at command level, based on comprehensive analysis that extends beyond individual performance data. Your role is to comply with directives, not to question the strategic vision of this program." The dismissal was public, calculated, and designed to establish clear boundaries. Around the conference table, other candidates shifted uncomfortably. Marcus looked down at his hands, avoiding eye contact. Claire's jaw tightened with barely suppressed frustration. Even Master Sergeant Dubois seemed taken aback by the colonel's harsh response to a legitimate question. "Furthermore," Richter continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone who enjoyed wielding absolute power, "candidates who demonstrate difficulty adapting to standardized procedures will be subject to additional evaluation. This program cannot afford to graduate snipers who are inflexible about equipment requirements or who prioritize personal preferences over military standards." The threat was unmistakable. Comply with the new requirements or face elimination from the program. Leev nodded once, maintaining her composure despite the public humiliation, but she noticed the concerned glances exchanged between other candidates. The atmosphere in the room had shifted from collaborative learning to fearful compliance. After the briefing, Leev returned to her quarters to examine the standardized rifle she had been issued. The weapon was undeniably impressive, a precision-built system worth more than most cars, equipped with advanced optics, environmental sensors, and ballistic computers. But as she handled the unfamiliar equipment, she felt disconnected from the fundamental relationship between shooter and rifle that her grandfather had emphasized. The electronic systems required constant battery power, creating dependencies that worried her. The ballistic computer demanded specific ammunition data that might not be available in all combat situations. The environmental sensors provided precise measurements, but couldn't account for the subtle indicators that experienced marksmen learned to read instinctively. Most concerning, the rifle's weight and balance were completely different from what she had trained with for over a decade. That evening, Chief Instructor Dubois found her on the outdoor range, practicing with the new equipment under the harsh glare of artificial lighting. Her normally fluid movements seemed mechanical, her natural shooting rhythm disrupted by unfamiliar systems. What had once been instinctive now required conscious thought about electronic displays and computerized calculations. "How are you adapting to the new gear?" Dubois asked quietly, settling beside her on the concrete bench that overlooked the illuminated targets. "It's functional," Leev replied diplomatically, though her frustration was evident in the careful neutrality of her response. "The technology is impressive. I'm learning to integrate the various systems." Dubois studied her for a moment. He had trained hundreds of snipers over his career and recognized the subtle signs of a gifted marksman being forced into an incompatible system. "You know, some of the best shooters I've worked with needed time to find their rhythm with new equipment. Don't let the adjustment period discourage you." But both of them understood that this wasn't simply about adaptation time. The colonel's directive had fundamentally changed the nature of Leev's participation in the program. She was no longer being evaluated on her exceptional marksmanship ability, but on her willingness to abandon the methods that had made her exceptional in favor of technological solutions that felt foreign and unnecessarily complex. Over the following days, the impact of Richter's new policy became increasingly apparent. Training exercises that had previously showcased individual skills and creativity were replaced with standardized procedures that emphasized technological proficiency over marksmanship fundamentals. Candidates spent more time learning to operate electronic systems than practicing the shooting techniques that would ultimately determine their effectiveness in combat. The change affected more than just Leev. Marcus, who had been experimenting with traditional range estimation techniques, returned to complete dependence on his laser rangefinder. Claire stopped practicing manual wind calculations and relied entirely on her ballistic computer's environmental sensors. The program's culture shifted from encouraging diverse approaches to demanding conformity with prescribed technological solutions. During a particularly challenging long-range exercise, Leev struggled with shots that would have been routine with her grandfather's rifle. The unfamiliar trigger broke differently, the stock didn't fit her shooting position naturally, and the electronic scope's display created visual distractions that interfered with her target acquisition. Her scores, while still respectable, were noticeably lower than her previous performances. Richter observed these sessions with obvious satisfaction, taking notes that would undoubtedly support his argument that traditional methods were inadequate for contemporary military requirements. From his perspective, Leev's reduced performance validated his policy decisions and demonstrated the superiority of technological standardization over individual preferences. But the colonel failed to recognize what Master Sergeant Dubois and the other candidates clearly understood. They were witnessing an exceptional marksman being forced to perform with equipment that suppressed rather than enhanced her natural abilities. The policy wasn't improving military effectiveness. It was systematically undermining one of the most talented shooters any of them had ever encountered. As the week progressed, the training environment became increasingly tense. What had once been a collaborative learning experience was transforming into a rigid system where questioning authority or suggesting alternatives was actively discouraged. Individual excellence was being sacrificed in favor of technological conformity, and everyone involved could sense that something essential was being lost in the process. The following week brought intensified scrutiny that extended far beyond equipment standardization. Colonel Richter had implemented what he termed enhanced performance monitoring, a system of constant observation and evaluation that seemed designed specifically to find fault with Leev's adaptation to the new technological requirements. Every training session was recorded, every shot analyzed, every movement critiqued through the lens of technological compliance rather than actual effectiveness. The morning range sessions, which had previously been opportunities for candidates to refine their skills and learn from each other, became exercises in microscopic examination. Richter positioned himself at the observation post with a tablet computer, documenting every aspect of each candidate's performance. But his attention focused disproportionately on Leev, noting her grip adjustments, her sight picture acquisition time, and her apparent comfort level with the electronic systems. Candidate Leev. The colonel's voice crackled through the range communication system during a precision shooting exercise. Your scope acquisition time is 1.3 seconds above optimal parameters. The ballistic computer is designed to provide instantaneous solutions. Your hesitation suggests insufficient confidence in technological systems. The criticism was technically accurate, but ignored the context that Leev was still adapting to unfamiliar equipment. After years of training with different systems, other candidates who had struggled with similar adjustments received encouragement and additional instruction time. For Leev, every minor difficulty was documented as evidence of inadequate technological integration. Master Sergeant Dubois watched these interactions with growing frustration. During a private conversation in his office, he expressed concerns that went beyond simple training methodology. "Colonel, with respect, candidate Leev's overall performance remains exceptional. Her fundamentals are flawless, her tactical understanding is sophisticated, and her accuracy under stress is among the best I've seen. The equipment transition challenges are temporary and normal." Richter's response was swift and decisive. "Sergeant, your role is to implement training protocols, not to advocate for individual candidates. This program cannot afford to graduate snipers who are dependent on obsolete methods or who resist technological integration. Our evaluation criteria must reflect contemporary military requirements, not traditional preferences." The exchange effectively silenced further advocacy from the chief instructor. Dubois understood that his own position could be compromised if he continued to challenge the colonel's assessment methods. The institutional pressure was designed to isolate Leev from potential allies and ensure that her performance was evaluated. Within Richter's predetermined framework, the psychological pressure intensified during individual counseling sessions that Richter instituted for all candidates. These meetings, ostensibly designed to provide personalized feedback and career guidance, became opportunities for the colonel to probe each candidate's commitment to technological modernization. For most candidates, the sessions were brief and encouraging. For Leev, they became extended interrogations about her attitude toward contemporary military equipment. "I've reviewed your performance data extensively," Richter began during one such session, consulting a thick folder of documentation. "Your accuracy scores have declined since equipment standardization was implemented. This suggests a concerning pattern of resistance to necessary technological adaptation." Leev maintained her military bearing despite the obvious bias in the colonel's assessment. "Sir, I'm working diligently to master the new systems. The performance decline is temporary, typical of any transition period when changing fundamental equipment configurations." "Perhaps," Richter replied, his tone suggesting skepticism. "But modern military operations don't allow for extended adaptation periods. Snipers must be able to utilize whatever equipment is available immediately and effectively. Your attachment to traditional methods may indicate a fundamental incompatibility with contemporary requirements." The sessions became increasingly confrontational, with Richter questioning not just her performance, but her professional judgment, her commitment to military standards, and her ability to function effectively in modern combat environments. Each meeting was documented, creating an official record that portrayed Leev as resistant to necessary changes rather than as an exceptional marksman. Adapting to artificial constraints, the pressure extended beyond formal evaluations. Richter began implementing surprise equipment inspections, checking each candidate's gear for proper maintenance and configuration. For most candidates, these inspections were routine. For Leev, they became opportunities to identify minor discrepancies or procedural variations that could be interpreted as evidence of inadequate attention to standardized protocols. During one such inspection, Richter discovered that Leev had adjusted her rifle's stock length by 2 millimeters to better accommodate her shooting position. The modification was within manufacturer's specifications and actually improved her stability and accuracy. But the colonel documented it as unauthorized equipment alteration, evidence of her unwillingness to accept standardized configurations. Military equipment is configured according to extensive testing and research, he lectured during the subsequent disciplinary meeting. Individual modifications, regardless of perceived benefits, undermine the standardization that ensures reliable performance across all personnel. Your tendency to customize equipment suggests difficulty accepting institutional authority and procedures. The accumulating documentation created a paper trail that painted Leev as a problem candidate despite her continued exceptional performance in actual shooting exercises. Richter was systematically building a case that her traditional approach to marksmanship represented a liability rather than an asset, that her individual excellence was less important than her compliance with technological protocols. Other candidates watched these developments with growing unease. They recognized that Leev was being held to impossible standards, criticized for adaptation challenges that would be considered normal for any other candidate. Marcus privately expressed his frustration to Claire during evening equipment maintenance. This isn't about her performance. She's still outfooting all of us, even with equipment she's not familiar with. Something else is going on. The toxic atmosphere was affecting the entire program. Candidates became reluctant to ask questions or seek clarification about training procedures, fearing that their inquiries might be interpreted as resistance to authority. The collaborative learning environment that had characterized the program's early weeks was replaced by fearful compliance and mutual suspicion. Master Sergeant Dubois found himself caught between his professional obligation to implement the colonel's directives and his recognition that one of the most gifted marksmen he had ever trained was being systematically undermined. The chief instructor began documenting his own observations, creating detailed records of Leev's actual performance that contradicted the colonel's negative assessments. As the week progressed, it became clear that Richter's campaign was about more than equipment standardization or technological adaptation. The colonel was determined to eliminate what he perceived as a threat to his vision of modern military training, regardless of the impact on program effectiveness or individual careers. Excellence had become the enemy, and Leev was standing directly in the crosshairs of institutional authority that prioritized compliance over competence. The whispers started during the third week of Colonel Richter's intensified oversight, spreading through the Hohenfels training facility like smoke drifting across the Bavarian countryside. Leev first noticed the change during morning physical training, when conversation stopped abruptly as she approached groups of candidates. The easy camaraderie that had characterized the program's early weeks was replaced by uncomfortable silences and averted gazes. "Did you hear about the safety incident in Leev's lane yesterday?" The fragment of conversation drifted from the equipment storage area as she passed. Something about improper trigger discipline. Could have been serious. The words made her blood run cold. There had been no safety incident. Her trigger discipline was flawless, developed through years of her grandfather's meticulous instruction. But someone was spreading stories that painted her as dangerous and reckless. The rumors multiplied with disturbing creativity. Stories emerged about her questioning direct orders during training exercises, though she had never challenged any instruction. Whispers circulated about her inability to work effectively with modern equipment, despite her continued strong performance in actual shooting evaluations. Most damaging were the suggestions that her traditional methods were creating safety risks. For other candidates, Master Sergeant Dubois found her in the cleaning station after evening training, methodically maintaining her assigned rifle with the same attention to detail she had applied to her grandfather's Mauser. His expression was grim as he settled beside her on the metal bench. "Leev, we need to talk about what's happening." "The rumors?" she asked quietly, not looking up from her cleaning routine. "I've heard some of them. None of it is true, Sergeant." "I know that," Dubois replied firmly. "But truth isn't always what matters in situations like this. Someone is systematically feeding information to Colonel Richter, creating a narrative about safety violations, insubordination, and training deficiencies. It's all fabricated, but it's being documented as if it were fact." The systematic nature of the campaign became clearer as Dubois shared what he had observed. Reports were being filed about incidents that never occurred, describing Lee's behavior in ways that contradicted objective documentation. Witnesses were being cited for events that surveillance cameras proved had never happened. The paper trail was being constructed with methodical precision, designed to support predetermined conclusions about her unsuitability for the program. Who's doing this? Leev asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. That's complicated, Dubois admitted. The reports are coming through official channels, but I can't identify the original sources. Someone with authority is orchestrating this, but they're using intermediaries to avoid direct accountability. The isolation intensified over the following days. Candidates who had previously sought her advice about shooting techniques now avoided her completely. Training partners requested different pairings for exercises. Even casual conversations in the dining facility ceased when she joined tables that had been animated moments before her arrival. Claire, the French candidate who had shown respect for Leev's abilities, finally approached her during a rare moment of privacy. I wanted you to know that some of us don't believe the stories, she said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't being observed. But we've been warned about associating with candidates under review. Our own evaluations could be affected. The message was clear. Supporting Leev had become professionally dangerous for other candidates. The isolation wasn't just social but strategic, designed to eliminate potential allies who might challenge the developing narrative. Colonel Richter had effectively weaponized the competitive nature of the program, making loyalty to truth a liability rather than a virtue. The rumors reached beyond the immediate training environment. During a video call with her unit commander in Norway, Leev detected subtle changes in his tone and questions. There have been some concerns raised about your adaptation to international training protocols, he mentioned carefully. Nothing official, but I wanted you to know that we're monitoring the situation. Even her home military was being influenced by the campaign. The reach of Richter's influence extended far beyond Hohenfels, threatening not just her position in the program, but her entire military career. The fabricated stories were being treated as legitimate intelligence, carrying weight despite their complete lack of factual foundation. That night, alone in her quarters, Leev stared at the photograph of her grandfather that she kept beside her bed. Eric's weathered face seemed to convey the wisdom he had shared during their countless hours together in the Norwegian mountains. Integrity doesn't guarantee fairness, he had told her once. But it's the only thing that survives when everything else fails. The campaign against her was built on lies, but those lies were being accepted as truth by people who should have known better. Excellence had become her enemy, and the system she had dedicated her life to serving was systematically destroying her reputation based on fabricated evidence and political calculations. The fabrication of evidence reached new levels of sophistication during the program's 7th week, when Colonel Richter summoned individual candidates for what he termed peer assessment interviews. These sessions, conducted in his sterile office overlooking the training ranges, were presented as routine evaluations designed to gather comprehensive feedback about each candidate's performance and suitability for sniper operations. For most candidates, the interviews were brief and straightforward. Questions focused on technical competencies, leadership potential, and general observations about training progress. But when discussions turned to Leev, the colonel's approach became methodical and leading, designed to extract statements that could be interpreted as criticism or concern. Tell me about your observations of candidate Leev's approach to equipment protocols, Richter asked Marcus during his session, consulting notes that suggested he already had specific concerns. Have you noticed any resistance to standardized procedures or difficulty adapting to technological requirements? Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Leev's actual performance had been impressive despite the equipment transition challenges. But the colonel's questioning implied that different answers were expected. She's been working hard to adapt to the new system, sir. The transition has been challenging for everyone. I see, Richter replied, making notes that seemed disproportionate to the neutral response. But specifically regarding safety protocols and procedural compliance, have you observed any concerning behaviors? or shortcuts that might compromise operational effectiveness. The questions continued with increasing specificity, each one designed to elicit responses that could be reinterpreted as evidence of problems. Richter's technique was subtle but effective. He never explicitly asked candidates to lie, but his leading questions and implied expectations created pressure to provide the responses he wanted rather than accurate observations. Claire faced similar questioning during her session. "I've noticed that you sometimes work with candidate Leev during partner exercises," the colonel observed. "Has she expressed any criticism of our training methods or equipment requirements? Any suggestion that traditional approaches might be superior to our technological systems?" "She's been completely professional, sir," Claire responded carefully. "I haven't heard any inappropriate comments about training protocols." But Richter pressed further, suggesting that perhaps Claire hadn't noticed subtle signs of resistance, or that loyalty to a fellow candidate might be affecting her objectivity. The psychological pressure was designed to plant seeds of doubt, to make candidates question their own observations and potentially revise their assessments to align with the colonel's apparent concerns. Most disturbing was the interview with Lieutenant Andreas Weber, a German instructor who had assisted with some training exercises. Richter's questions to Weber were more direct, focusing on specific incidents that could be documented as official training violations. The colonel had prepared detailed scenarios, complete with dates and locations, asking Weber to confirm observations of events that had never occurred. On October 15th, during the long-range exercise, did you observe candidate Leev bypassing the prescribed ballistic calculation procedures? Richter asked, consulting what appeared to be an official incident report. Several sources have indicated she relied on unauthorized estimation methods rather than utilizing the electronic systems. Weber, confused by the specific allegation, struggled to recall the details of exercises that had occurred weeks earlier. Under pressure to provide definitive answers about technical procedures he hadn't closely monitored, he found himself making statements that could be interpreted as confirming the colonel's suggestions. The interview technique was designed to create documentary evidence based on manufactured scenarios and leading questions. Master Sergeant Dubois discovered the extent of the fabrication when he was summoned for his own assessment interview. Richter presented him with a folder containing detailed reports about Leev's alleged performance problems, complete with witness statements and incident documentation. The paperwork appeared official and comprehensive, but Dubois recognized that much of it described events that had never happened or distorted normal training interactions into evidence of misconduct. "Sergeant, these reports raise serious concerns about candidate Leev's suitability for program completion," Richter stated, his tone suggesting that the evidence was overwhelming. "Multiple sources have documented safety violations, procedural non-compliance, and resistance to technological integration. As chief instructor, your assessment is crucial for determining appropriate action." Dubois found himself in an impossible position. Challenging the documented allegations would require him to essentially accuse the colonel of fabricating evidence, a career-ending accusation that would be nearly impossible to prove. But confirming the reports would validate a systematic lie, designed to destroy an exceptional soldier's career. "Sir, my direct observations of candidate Leev's performance have been consistently positive," Dubois replied carefully. "Her safety record is flawless, her technical skills are exceptional, and her adaptation to new equipment has been progressing normally." Richter's expression hardened. "Sergeant, your personal opinions are noted, but they must be evaluated against objective documentation from multiple sources. The evidence clearly indicates patterns of behavior that are incompatible with program standards. Your role is to provide professional assessment, not personal advocacy." The message was unmistakable: support the colonel's narrative or face professional consequences. The system had been carefully constructed to eliminate dissenting voices and create an official record, that justified predetermined conclusions. Truth had become irrelevant in the face of institutional authority, backed by fabricated documentation. That evening, Dubois made a decision that would define his own character. He began creating his own detailed documentation of Leev's actual performance, recording accurate observations that contradicted the colonel's manufactured evidence. The chief instructor understood that he was risking his career, but some principles were worth defending regardless of personal cost. The formal accusation came on a gray Monday morning when autumn fog rolled across the Bavarian training grounds like a shroud. Leev was summoned to Colonel Richter's office with unusual urgency, the message delivered by a stone-faced administrative clerk who avoided eye contact. As she walked through the corridors of the command building, other personnel seemed to watch her passage with expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. Richter sat behind his polished desk with the satisfied expression of someone who had finally assembled all necessary pieces of a complex puzzle. Before him lay a thick folder containing weeks of accumulated documentation, fabricated reports, twisted witness statements, and carefully constructed evidence designed to support predetermined conclusions about her unsuitability for the program. Candidate Leev, the colonel began without preamble, his Austrian accent lending formal authority to words that would destroy her military career. I have completed my comprehensive review of your performance in this program. The evidence indicates serious deficiencies that cannot be overlooked or remediated through additional training. The words hit like precision rounds, each one calculated for maximum impact. Leev maintained her military bearing despite the shock, standing at attention while Richter enumerated the charges that would end her dream of becoming a military sniper. Multiple documented safety violations, systematic resistance to technological integration, and failure to adapt to standardized procedures. He continued, consulting papers that contained lies presented as official facts. Your performance represents a clear incompatibility with contemporary sniper operations and modern military requirements. Sir, Leev responded with the professional courtesy that had characterized her entire military service. I request the opportunity to review this documentation and provide evidence in my defense. My actual performance records contradict these allegations. Richter's smile was cold and calculated. This is not a negotiation, candidate. It is a notification of administrative action based on extensive evaluation and multiple source documentation. Effective immediately, you are dismissed from the program with prejudice. Your departure transport has been arranged for tomorrow morning. The finality was devastating. Dismissal with prejudice meant that her military record would permanently reflect failure in elite training, effectively ending any possibility of special operations assignments or advanced sniper qualification. The notation would follow her throughout her remaining military service, marking her as someone who had been tried and found wanting at the highest levels. You will confine yourself to quarters except for meals and administrative processing. Richter continued, clearly enjoying the exercise of absolute authority. Your personal effects will be inspected, your training records will be sealed, and your security clearances will be reviewed upon return to your home unit. The systematic destruction was complete. Not only was Leev being eliminated from the program, but Richter was ensuring that her failure would be documented thoroughly enough to prevent any future challenges to his decision. The colonel had constructed an airtight case based on fabricated evidence, creating official records that would be nearly impossible to dispute through normal military channels. As Leev turned to leave the office, she felt the weight of injustice settling on her shoulders like the fog that surrounded the training facility. She had served with distinction for years, had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship ability, and had maintained perfect integrity throughout her military career. Now she was being destroyed by lies and institutional politics that prioritized compliance over competence. But what Richter failed to anticipate was the impact his decision would have on others who had witnessed Leev's actual performance. The colonel had been so focused on eliminating what he perceived as a threat to his authority that he had ignored the respect and admiration she had earned from fellow candidates and training staff who understood the difference between political persecution and legitimate evaluation. The next morning dawned clear and cold, with November frost covering the Bavarian training grounds in crystalline patterns that reflected the early sunlight like scattered diamonds. Leev dressed in her full dress uniform for the final time as a member of the elite sniper program, ensuring every detail was perfect despite the circumstances. Her ribbons were aligned flawlessly, her boots polished to mirror brightness, her bearing military straight despite the weight of injustice on her shoulders. Word of her dismissal had spread throughout the facility during the night, carried by the informal communication networks that exist in every military installation. The official explanation cited failure to meet program standards, but personnel who had observed her exceptional performance understood that something fundamentally wrong was happening. As she packed her single duffel bag, Leev included the photograph of her grandfather that had sustained her through difficult moments. Eric's weathered face seemed to convey the wisdom he had shared about maintaining dignity in the face of adversity. Character is revealed not in victory, but in how you handle defeat, he had told her during one of their mountain expeditions. Grace under pressure is the truest measure of a soldier. The walk to the departure area required crossing the main training facility, passing ranges where she had demonstrated exceptional marksmanship and classrooms where she had excelled in tactical instruction. Each location held memories of achievement and respect earned through competence rather than politics. But now these same spaces felt like monuments to opportunity lost and excellence unrewarded. Master Sergeant Dubois waited near the equipment storage building, his expression grim with the knowledge of what was actually happening. As Leev approached, he came to attention and rendered a precise salute, a gesture of respect that contradicted the official narrative about her failure to meet standards. "It's been an honor working with you," he said quietly, his voice carrying conviction that defied institutional pressure. Everyone who knows anything about marksmanship recognizes what's really happening here. Other candidates began appearing along her route, their presence initially seeming coincidental, but quickly revealing itself as intentional. Marcus stood near the armory, his expression serious as he nodded respectfully. Claire positioned herself by the administration building, offering a subtle thumbs up that communicated solidarity despite the risk to her own position in the program. The gathering was unprecedented in military training environments, where individual survival typically took precedence over collective action. But Leev's quiet dignity and obvious competence had earned respect that transcended institutional politics. Fellow candidates understood that they were witnessing the destruction of excellence by authority that felt threatened by competence it couldn't control. Even support personnel who barely knew her personally had found reasons to be visible during her departure. Maintenance technicians paused their work to watch. Range safety officers positioned themselves along her path, and administrative staff gathered near, windows overlooking the route to the transportation area. The silent demonstration was powerful, precisely because it required no spoken words or organized coordination. Professional military personnel were using their physical presence to bear witness to injustice, communicating respect for competence and disapproval of political persecution through the simple act of being seen. Colonel Richter observed from his office window, his satisfaction at eliminating a perceived threat gradually replaced by unease as he recognized the implications of what was happening below. The widespread support for Leev suggested that his campaign against her had been recognized for what it was: political persecution rather than legitimate evaluation. As the transport vehicle approached, Leev maintained her forward focus, refusing to acknowledge the obvious injustice or display any emotion that might compromise her dignity. She had been trained to accept orders and endure hardship, and she would demonstrate those qualities even in defeat. But she was unaware that her quiet grace was inspiring something unprecedented in military training history. Her walk across that facility was becoming a moment that defined the difference between authority and respect, between command and leadership, between institutional power and individual character. The morning fog was lifting, revealing clear skies that stretched endlessly toward a horizon where her uncertain future waited. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for decades to come. As Leev's transport vehicle disappeared beyond the main gate, something extraordinary began unfolding across the Hohenfels Training Area. It started with a single action that seemed routine but carried profound symbolic weight. Master Sergeant Dubois walked to the center of the main training range and stood at attention, facing the direction of Leev's departure. The gesture appeared simple, even mundane, to casual observers. Military personnel stood at attention countless times daily as part of routine protocol. But experienced soldiers recognized something different in Dubois's bearing. This wasn't ceremonial compliance, but conscious defiance. A silent statement that traditional military respect for excellence transcended institutional politics. Within minutes, other personnel began joining him. Range Safety Officer Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez left her observation post and took position beside the chief instructor. Equipment Technician Corporal Thomas Mueller emerged from the armory and stood in formation. One by one, training staff members who had witnessed Leev's exceptional performance and recognized the injustice of her dismissal made the decision to stand together. The movement spread beyond the immediate training staff. Candidates who remained in the program faced an impossible choice: protect their own careers by remaining silent or risk everything by demonstrating solidarity with someone who had been officially labeled a failure. Marcus was the first to join the growing formation, his presence communicating that political persecution was more dangerous to military integrity than individual career risk. Claire followed moments later, her decision representing not just personal courage but recognition that allowing excellence to be destroyed by institutional insecurity threatened the foundation of military professionalism. The Swedish candidate Magnus, the Italian Antonio, and others gradually joined the silent formation, understanding that they were participating in something unprecedented in military training history. The administration building's communications center became a hub of frantic activity as personnel tried to understand what was happening. Colonel Richter, observing from his office window, initially assumed he was witnessing some sort of impromptu ceremony or training exercise. But as the formation grew and its purpose became clear, his satisfaction at eliminating Leev transformed into alarm about the broader implications of the unprecedented demonstration. What is the meaning of this formation? He demanded over the facility's communication system, his voice carrying authority that typically commanded immediate compliance. All personnel will return to assigned duties immediately. But the formation held professional soldiers who had dedicated their careers to following orders were choosing to disobey direct commands rather than remain silent about obvious injustice. The demonstration represented more than support for one individual. It was a collective statement about the values that should govern military institutions. The impact extended beyond Hohenfels. The facility's communication networks carried reports of the unprecedented formation to higher headquarters, where senior officers tried to understand why an elite training program had apparently experienced a complete breakdown of command authority. Initial reports suggested everything from mutiny to coordinated protest, descriptions that failed to capture the dignified nature of what was actually occurring. At the European Union military headquarters in Brussels, General Patricia Mueller received urgent communications about the situation at Hohenfels. The general, who had previously supported Colonel Richter's technological modernization initiatives, found herself dealing with a crisis that threatened the credibility of the entire multinational training program. News of professional soldiers standing in silent formation to protest the dismissal of a candidate suggested fundamental problems with program leadership and evaluation procedures. That the demonstration's power lay in its disciplined restraint. No one spoke out of turn, violated direct orders, or engaged in behavior that could be classified as mutinous. Instead, they used the military's own traditions of formation and bearing to communicate dissent, creating a protest that was simultaneously defiant and respectful of military protocol. Master Sergeant Dubois, as the senior enlisted person in the formation, understood that his career was likely over. But he also recognized that some principles were worth defending regardless of personal cost. The military's strength depended on protecting excellence rather than persecuting it, on rewarding competence rather than compliance, on maintaining standards that attracted the best rather than driving them away. As the morning progressed, the formation remained steady despite increasing pressure from higher authority. Word spread throughout the European military community about the unprecedented demonstration at Hohenfels, triggering conversations about military culture, institutional integrity, and the protection of excellence in professional organizations. Silent formation had become something larger than its individual participants. Statement about the values that should govern military institutions and the courage required to defend those values when they came under attack from within. By noon, the unprecedented demonstration at Hohenfels had triggered responses that reached far beyond the Bavarian training facility. Secure communications networks throughout the European Union military establishment carried reports of the situation, generating reactions from senior officers who recognized that they were dealing with something historically significant rather than routine disciplinary matter. General Elisabeth Hartmann, commander of German Special Operations, received detailed briefings about the formation while attending a NATO planning conference in Vienna. The general had served with Master Sergeant Dubois during counter-terrorism operations in Mali and understood that his participation in any demonstration represented serious conviction rather than casual protest. Her immediate response was to contact colleagues throughout the European military community to gather additional information about the candidate, whose dismissal had triggered such unprecedented solidarity. The investigation revealed disturbing patterns. Officers who had worked with Leev during joint training exercises provided testimony about her exceptional competence and professional character. Range records from multiple facilities confirmed her outstanding marksmanship abilities. Most significantly, several senior officers reported receiving informal inquiries about her performance that seemed designed to gather negative information rather than objective assessment. Colonel Jean-Pierre Moreau, France's representative to the EU Military Training Oversight Committee, made calls to colleagues who had observed the Hohenfels program. The conversations revealed widespread concern about Colonel Richter's leadership methods and growing questions about the criteria being used to evaluate candidates. Multiple sources indicated that political considerations were influencing training decisions in ways that compromised program integrity. The Austrian Defense Ministry found itself managing a crisis that extended far beyond a single training program. Defense Minister Klaus Weber received urgent briefings about the situation at Hohenfels, including detailed reports about Colonel Richter's systematic campaign against a candidate whose only apparent failing was using traditional methods to achieve exceptional results. The political implications were enormous. Austria's reputation for military professionalism was being questioned by allied nations. Meanwhile, the demonstration at Hohenfels continued with disciplined persistence that impressed even critics of the participants' actions. The formation maintained military bearing and protocol while communicating unmistakable dissent about institutional decisions. No one violated direct orders or engaged in behavior that could be classified as mutinous, but their collective presence created pressure that could not be ignored. International media began covering the story after military journalists recognized the unprecedented nature of professional soldiers risking their careers to protest injustice. Reports described the formation as a silent revolution in military culture, a demonstration that traditional values of excellence and integrity could prevail over institutional politics when enough people chose courage over convenience. Norwegian Defense Ministry dispatched a senior officer to investigate reports about their soldiers' treatment at Hohenfels. Colonel Astrid Nordahl, a decorated veteran with extensive NATO experience, arrived with authority to conduct an independent review of Leev's dismissal. Her preliminary interviews with training staff revealed significant discrepancies between official documentation and witnessed events. Back at Hohenfels, Colonel Richter faced a complete breakdown of his authority. His attempts to order the formation to disperse were ignored by personnel who had decided that some principles were worth defending regardless of personal consequences. His calls for disciplinary action were met with requests for written orders that he hesitated to provide, understanding that documented attempts to punish the demonstration participants would create permanent evidence of his institutional overreach. Pressure intensified when General Mueller arrived from Brussels with a team of investigators, authorized to conduct a comprehensive review of the program's operations. Her first action was to interview formation participants individually, seeking to understand the motivations behind their unprecedented demonstration. The conversations revealed a pattern of systematic persecution that contradicted every principle of fair evaluation and professional development. Master Sergeant Dubois, when questioned about his decision to risk his career for someone else's cause, provided a response that would be quoted in military leadership courses for years afterward. Excellence doesn't belong to individuals, sir. It belongs to the institution. When we allow politics to destroy competence, we destroy the foundation that everything else is built on. The investigation expanded to include communications analysis, review of training records, and interviews with candidates from multiple nations. Evidence mounted that Colonel Richter had implemented evaluation criteria that prioritized compliance over competence, creating an environment where political conformity mattered more than professional excellence. As evening approached, the formation at Hohenfels had been maintained for over 8 hours. The demonstration's persistence, combined with growing international attention and official investigation, created pressure that made continued resistance to change impossible. The military's most fundamental values, honor, integrity, and excellence, were being defended by people willing to sacrifice their careers rather than remain silent about obvious injustice. The unprecedented solidarity had achieved something remarkable. It forced institutional authority to confront the consequences of prioritizing politics over performance, compliance over competence, and convenience over character. The secure communication that arrived at General Muller's temporary command post at Hohenfels changed everything. The message, transmitted directly from the European Union Military Command in Brussels, was brief but carried the authority of the highest levels of continental defense leadership. All charges against candidate Leev are hereby dismissed. Comprehensive investigation reveals systematic misconduct in evaluation procedures. Immediate reinstatement with full honors authorized. Administrative review of program leadership to commence immediately. The investigation had been swift and devastating in its conclusions. Digital forensics experts had analyzed communication records, revealing patterns of fabricated documentation and coordinated character assassination that violated every principle of military justice. Colonel Richter's carefully constructed case had crumbled under professional scrutiny, exposing a systematic campaign designed to eliminate excellence rather than reward it. General Mueller read the communication twice before walking to the window that overlooked the training range where the unprecedented formation had maintained its silent vigil for nearly 12 hours. The sight of professional soldiers risking their careers to defend institutional integrity had captured international attention and triggered the kind of comprehensive review that military bureaucracies typically avoided. But some situations demanded decisive action, and this was clearly one of them. Within hours, transportation was arranged to retrieve Leev from the Munich airport, where she had been waiting for connections to Norway. The message delivered by military courier was simple but transformative. Report immediately to Hohenfels for program reinstatement. All previous dismissal actions are void. Full investigation has vindicated your performance and character. The journey back to the training facility gave Leev time to process the extraordinary developments. Her grandfather's wisdom about integrity surviving when everything else failed had proven prophetic, but she never could have imagined that her quiet dignity would inspire the kind of collective courage that had apparently forced institutional change. When her transport vehicle approached the main gate at Hohenfels, she could see the formation still holding on the training range. Master Sergeant Dubois and dozens of other personnel had maintained their position throughout the day, creating a demonstration of solidarity that had captured the attention of military leaders across Europe. The sight was both humbling and inspiring proof that excellence, when properly recognized and defended, could prevail over political persecution. The formal reinstatement ceremony took place on the same range where Leev had first demonstrated her exceptional marksmanship with her grandfather's rifle. General Mueller personally presented the orders that restored her to full candidate status, but more significantly, authorized her to complete the program, using whatever equipment she deemed most effective for mission accomplishment. The European Union Military Command has determined that this program's mission is to develop the most capable snipers possible, the general announced to the assembled formation. Equipment preferences that enhance rather than diminish performance are not just acceptable but encouraged. Individual excellence will be protected and rewarded, not persecuted. Colonel Richter had been reassigned pending a comprehensive review of his leadership methods. His systematic campaign against traditional approaches had been exposed as dangerous institutional bias that threatened military effectiveness. The Richter protocols, as they became known throughout European military circles, would serve as a cautionary example of how authority could be corrupted when threatened by competence it couldn't control. But the real transformation went far beyond individual consequences. The European Union implemented sweeping changes to military training evaluation procedures, establishing clear protections for candidates who demonstrated excellence through unconventional methods. The Leev standards, as they were formally designated, required that evaluation criteria focus on actual performance rather than equipment preferences or procedural conformity. Master Sergeant Dubois, who had risked his career to defend institutional integrity, was promoted and assigned to develop new instructor training programs that emphasized recognition and protection of individual excellence. His decision to document accurate performance records had provided crucial evidence for the investigation, proving that courage and competence could prevail when supported by careful preparation and moral conviction. The program's remaining candidates completed their training in an environment transformed by the events they had witnessed. Marcus Clare and others graduated with enhanced understanding that military excellence required not just technical proficiency, but moral courage to defend principles when they came under attack from within institutional structures. Leev completed the sniper program with the highest scores in its history, using her grandfather's rifle for the final qualifying exercise. Her performance demonstrated conclusively that excellence transcended equipment preferences, that traditional methods and modern technology could coexist effectively when individual competence was properly recognized and supported. The story of the unprecedented formation at Hohenfels became legendary within European military circles, taught in leadership courses as an example of how collective moral courage could force institutional change when individual excellence was threatened by political persecution. The demonstration proved that respect could not be commanded, but had to be earned through actions that protected rather than persecuted competence. Years later, as a decorated sniper instructor herself, Leev would tell new candidates about the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure, of trusting in excellence even when authority tried to suppress it, and of the quiet dignity that could inspire others to choose courage over convenience. Her grandfather's rifle, still perfectly maintained and devastatingly accurate, served as a tangible reminder that some things, integrity, excellence, and respect for tradition, were worth defending regardless of personal cost. The morning fog that had covered Hohenfels during her darkest hour had lifted completely, revealing clear skies that stretched toward a horizon filled with possibilities for those who chose character over convenience, competence over compliance, and excellence over everything else that might compromise the integrity of military service. The silent formation had spoken louder than any words could have, and the military would never be the same. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.